Candace Dobie is the founder of the Can Do Company. She is a leadership communication strategist, author of A Cool Girl's Guide to Courage, a professional speaker, and a courage coach. Ooh, we need to hear about that. She leverages a decade of research and courage and an award-winning marketing career leading teams at Chipotle. And that there is a Chipotle um, what is it, a trophy behind her. She may share that with you. Yep, there's a Chipotle. She's learned a lot and insights. She shares insights from her solo global travel, and she helps organizations build a culture of courage where employees spend less time censoring themselves. Oh goodness, we can use that, and more time performing at their potential. She will share today tools and strategies you can use to speak up with confidence and lead with courage. And with that, I'm so grateful you're here with us, Candace. Welcome. And I am going to pass it on over to you and Seth, you can join us.
I caught it. Thanks so much, Sarah. Oh my goodness. And thank you all for being here with me. We are about to get our courage information, and we're going to specifically talk about how to communicate courageously in the now. What I have been hearing from a lot of professionals is that, you know what, Candace? There are moments. There are moments when I want to speak up, when I have something important that I want to say. But the moment that opportunity that I find myself in that opportunity, it just feels like I am too emotionally charged. There's too much emotional intensity for me to say the thing that I want to say. I know that there are probably moments where that has happened to you, where you've got something to say. Maybe you've got a client who had a conversation with you unexpectedly about how they didn't feel like you were delivering for them or working for them. And you've been working 24/7 trying to find this client a new home. And you are feeling emotionally charged, but there is something that you want to say in the moment in support and honor of yourself. Well, I've had many of those moments, and one particular moment was when I was working at Chipotle. And it was, I don't know, it's been over a decade ago, but when I was there, I was actually named the the best marketing strategist in the company. So I won this award that you see in my hand. You also see it right here behind me in a multi-billion dollar company with locations across the US and in Europe. I was named the top performing marketing strategist. And that felt really nice to win that award or to be named the best performing. And what that led me to do though is say, if I am the best performing, if I really am the best marketing strategist that this company has, this multi-billion dollar company has, then I should probably be paid the best. Like I should probably be the top paid marketing strategist in the company. And so what this led me to do was to go to my boss and let him know that I was very appreciative of being named the best marketing strategist. And what would be nice, what I thought would be fair, is to be paid in a way that was congruent with the value that I was bringing to the company. So, in effect, I asked him for a raise. And my boss looked at me and was a little bit shocked. My boss was a little intrigued, and I think he was a little bit annoyed that I had come into his office after winning this award and asking him for a raise. And what he said next to me, I will never forget. And actually, I want your help in filling in the blank because these were the words that he said. After we did a couple of exchanges, he said something, I said something back. He turned to me and he said, "You're being blank." And I want you to just take a guess in the chat for me and let me know, what do you think? What do you think he said? You're being what? You're being what? And actually, for the chat, what you're going to need to do, you can send it to everyone or you can send it to hosts and panelists. I think I'll see it, but for everybody to see it, you'll need to make sure that you set it to everyone. So Yolanda says, "You're being bold. You're being too emotional. You're being ungrateful." And Donna, you win the prize, the imaginary award that I have in my hand, because that's exactly what he told me. He said, "You're being ungrateful." And I thought to myself, What I really want to say in this moment is, are you crazy? Like, have you lost your mind? I'm being ungrateful. No, you just named me the top marketing strategist in the company. What's ungrateful about coming and being compensated in a way that aligns with the value that I'm bringing? But I was so emotionally charged in that moment that there wasn't really anything that I could say to honor myself or honor my perspective. And you may find yourself in the same position as you're working with clients, as you're working with colleagues, where you want to say something courageously. You want to honor yourself. You want to say the thing that needs to be said in the moment, but you're feeling the emotions. There is an emotional charge, and you don't want to be labeled as too emotional. Well, that is what this conversation is for. It's for us to get equipped with tools and strategies that can help us emotionally regulate, to regulate our emotions so that you can, I can, we all can courageously speak up in the moment. Now, I find that this is something that professionals, as I'm having conversations with professionals from all over, that this is information that they want. These are strategies that they need because of the external environment that we find ourselves in. We're having conversations, the economy is changing, there's social shifts that are happening, and we want to be able to speak up. There's a lot of reason to be emotionally charged. But what we don't want is the emotional charge to stop us from saying the thing that needs to courageously be said. So that's one of my examples of working and wanting to say something, but just feeling way too emotional charged to say, are you crazy? But in a more strategic way. And so now what I want to hear from you is I want you to share with me a moment, and with everyone on this call, a moment when you did want to speak up courageously. You wanted to say something. You wanted to advocate for yourself or be assertive or to share your perspective, but you felt like if you did, you would come across as too emotional, or the emotional charge behind the words that you were going to say were just too much. So what I'm going to invite you to do is take out your phone, point it at this QR code, and you're going to be able to answer this question for all of us to see. And then also, Megan is going to drop a link in the chat. If you rather do this on your computer, you can do that on your computer as well with the link that Megan just dropped in the chat. So I'm going to give you just one second here. Actually, I'll give you more than 1 second, but I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to go ahead and get this QR code or click on the link. And then I want you to share, when did you want to speak up? This can be recently or not. When did you want to speak up, say something courageous in the moment, but the emotional charge that you felt just would not let you do it? So I'm going to go ahead and click on the next screen. And if you need to find this QR code to answer the question, you are going to find it in the top right-hand corner. So I see we've got one response in so far, many, many times. So it sounds like one person, at least on this call, wanted to speak up but felt too emotional many, many times. Someone else has said, when my boss falsely accused me of something. Yeah. Yeah, you wanted to honor yourself and assert yourself and speak up for yourself and take up for yourself. But the emotions were maybe too much and you didn't know what to say or how to regulate your emotions. Is there anything else? Oh, here's something. In front of a group, when someone was berating a colleague, right? So you wanted to take up maybe in defense of that person who was being berated, but there was so much emotional charge that you couldn't say anything. And I completely understand that. All right. Are there any more examples before we move on? When was the time you wanted to speak up courageously, but you know what? You just felt too emotional. All right. When things are never enough. Oh, yeah. Maybe when you're talking to a colleague, you're working with your partner and you've got a goal, but now the goalpost has moved and it's never enough. We're always working, we're always churning, but maybe not saying anything. Or many a times when you go above and beyond and feel like it was misconstrued, like you weren't understood, when someone twist what you were doing and made it into something else. These are beautiful examples. Thank you all for sharing these. Okay. So these are moments where we wanted to speak up, but we felt too emotional to do so. And we might find that these moments, as you have said in the comments here, it happens many times. Many times I want to speak up, but I feel too emotional. So the invitation for us is not to not speak up. It's not to say the thing that needs to be said, to honor yourself. It's not to do that. The invitation is actually to regulate our emotions, to get some strategies and put them in our back pocket so that we can better regulate our emotions and increase the probability that we can actually say something. All right, so let's pretend like you wanted to say something to your boss who accused you of saying, and not only did you want to say something, you said it. We're going to pretend that the work that you were doing was misconstrued, but you came to the table and you wanted to share and clarify how your work had been misconstrued or misunderstood. So these are what I'm going to call free choices. These are the things that we wish we could do if we were not emotionally charged or if we were not afraid or experiencing fear. So if I was in my boss's office and I had access to my free choice, what I would have said to him was something like, maybe I would have asked him a question. Maybe I would have said, "What do you mean?" Maybe I would have explained myself and said, "Hey, if I am the top performing marketing strategist, tell me um, what I'm missing." Maybe I would have said that. Tell me what I might be missing to not make the link between being the best marketing strategist and being paid the best. What am I missing? Maybe I would have asked him a question. So this is what we do when we have free choices is we do the thing that we want to do. But many of us do not have access to our free choices. So just like you would have said something to your boss or your family member or your partner or your colleague, I would have said something to my boss. We don't have access to our free choices. And there are actually two kind of barriers that are keeping us from our free choices. So the first barrier that is keeping us from our free choices is lack. Usually, we can't get to the place where we can access our free choices and do the thing that we need to do, which is often asserting ourselves, taking up for ourselves, honoring ourselves because of something that we lack. So, what this looks like is maybe we lack confidence, maybe we lack information. Maybe we lack a worthy purpose for doing the thing that seems hard to do, or maybe we lack strategies to regulate our emotions. So this is on the outer ring of our free choices because this is the easiest thing to get access to. If we, excuse me, if we lack something, then all we need to do really is we need to fill in the gap from what we lack. If we lack confidence, it means we need to build up our competence. If we lack information, then we just go get the information. So lack is one of the things that is keeping us from our free choices, and we're going to take a stab at that today by getting some strategies in our back pocket for how to regulate our emotions. But the other thing that keeps us from our free choices that protects it even more closely than lack is loss. The reason it becomes really difficult for us to say those things, we don't want to come across as too emotional, we don't want to be labeled that way, is because ultimately we are afraid of losing. And what we are afraid of losing is we're afraid of losing relationships. We're afraid of losing, access to maybe we're afraid of losing contracts. We're afraid of losing clients as a result of saying the thing that we want to say and need to say. And so these are the two things that keep us from our free choices. Now, lack is one that involves quite a process. It involves quite a lot for us to reframe loss, which if you heard me at Woman Up last year, you heard me talk about it a little bit. But we're going to focus on lack. Do we lack the ability to regulate our emotions? And so we're going to go ahead and fill in that gap with the content that we're going over today. But here's what I want to say first. First, I want to ground us in a definition for courage. Courage is a choice to face a risk for a worthy purpose. So, courage is your personal choice. That conversation that you need to have with your boss when you were blamed for something that you didn't do, that conversation that you need to have with an agent who isn't performing to their potential or isn't performing to your brokerage's standards. Courage is a choice. It's a personal choice to face a risk. So yes, the risk is tension. Yes, the risk is that the agent could get really upset and decide to go to another brokerage. They could leave. Yes, the risk is isolation and judgment. But the reason that we take these risks, the risk to speak up, the risk to step up, the risk to show up, is the only reason that we would ever do it is for a worthy purpose. The only reason you're going to have that card conversation with your boss about something that they misunderstood is for a worthy purpose. It's because you have a value of self-respect or because you have a value of integrity or honesty. And because you have that value and you're very clear on that value, that is the invitation for you to engage with risk. It's the same thing. If you really care, if you're a broker on this call and you really care about, the values that you have at your firm, but there's an agent who is acting or behaving incongruently with these values, and it leads to you needing to have a hard conversation with them, but we're a small team and I don't want to create tension. I don't want to have to, engage with them and wonder if they're okay. But the reason why we do that, the reason why we face those risks is for the worthy purpose, the health of your team, your firm, yourself. And so that's what courage is. Okay, so this is why we need to speak up in the moment, but I understand that it's hard. I understand that we can be emotionally charged, and I understand that we need strategies. So, internal resources, courage is an internal resource. That is something that is within you. Internal resources are greater, and this is when I need your help again to go into the chat and help me fill in what this is. Internal resources are greater than blank circumstances. So I'm going to go to the chat and see what we might have in there. Internal resources are greater than blank circumstances. Does anybody know what goes in that blank? External. Thank you. Sarah, here you go. Here's the imaginary prize. You win. Internal resources are greater than external circumstances. And this is really important for us to ground ourselves in and use as our foundation as we move through the rest of this presentation. But as we move through what is happening in the industry right now, as we are acclimating to change, as we are in a sea of what many people may consider chaos, in the industry or just in the country, internal resources are greater than external circumstances. So it becomes really important for every single person on this call to understand that what you have internally in terms of resources is greater than what is happening externally. But they don't really we can't access their full value unless we clarify them, unless we use them, unless we leverage them. So, courage is an internal process, and these strategies that I'm going to give you for emotional regulation, these are internal resources that can help you rise above external circumstances, even when you're having difficult conversations with clients or with your colleagues. So, before we get into these strategies, let's just all get on the same page about what emotional regulation is. And this is an official definition from the National Library of Medicine, but you can read it here. Essentially, emotional regulation is all of the conscious, it's the non-conscious strategies we use to control an emotional response. That's what emotional regulation is. And there are three factors that support emotional regulation. The first of these, actually, give me 1 second. I'm going to pause. I'm going to wipe my nose. And I'm going to come back. This is what happens when you're live. Three factors that support emotional regulation. So the first one is this. The first factor when we are controlling our emotions, when we're regulating our emotions, is that you have to disengage from the intensity of the emotion. So just like you are, being worked, you're doing things, you're working so hard and it's not being acknowledged or it's being misconstrued. Just like I'm in my boss's office and I'm asking for a raise that, so I can be paid in alignment with the value that I'm contributing. And he tells me that I am being ungrateful. So I'm emotionally charged, you're emotionally charged, and part of emotional regulation is disengaging from that intensity. So you want to take yourself out of the emotional center and you want to create some distance. In psychology, this is actually called emotional distancing. And if you've ever, you know, been giving, advice to one of your friends. One of your friends is going through something, really terrible, and you're trying to give that person advice and you say something like, "Well, what would you tell me to do?" Or what would you tell your child to do, your son to do? This is actually an example of emotional distancing. So rather than you being in the center of the emotional situation, you're actually trying to get somebody else to imagine, well, what would you tell another person to do? That's a small example of emotional distancing. So part of emotional regulation is we have to just disengage from the intensity of the emotion. Another part of it is that we have to interrupt the cycle of negative cognition. Now, negative cognition is just a fancy term for worry. Like you have to interrupt the cycle of worrying or worst case hypothesizing. Like if I say something to my boss, like I'll get fired. And then you start thinking about if I get fired, I won't have a job. I can't pay my mortgage. Then I'm going to be on the street. Okay. So this is the cycle of negative cognition that we have to interrupt when we are, this is part of emotional regulation. And the last part here is you re-engage with the situation adaptively. So this means that you take a moment, you take a beat, but then you re-engage with the situation from a different perspective. So for me, if I was to think about a different perspective, could it be that my manager is having a bad day? Could it be that he had an experience earlier in the day that he is still thinking about that is intruding into our conversation? Could it be that my manager grew up with a set of beliefs that I didn't grow up with that's leading him to make this comment to me? This is what, re-engaging with the situation adaptively looks like. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this seems like a lot of work. And the answer is that it is. Emotional regulation, if we're trying to get better at doing this, it's a process. And part of this process is just understanding what it is. And part of it is just making a commitment to using strategies that I'm about to share with you as often as you can. So, what do those strategies look like? Here's the first strategy. And again, we're going to go to the chat and I want you to fill in the blank for me. So, strategy number one is that we can, to regain control of our emotions, to regulate our emotions, we can blank deeply. So, what goes in that blank? We can blank deeply. Diana, here you go. Here's your imaginary present gift. Yes, Diana, Ruth, Regina, inhale. The word that I'm looking for though is breathe. We can breathe deeply. Now, there is a lot of research out there that supports breathing, intentionally breathing to not only regulate your emotions, but it's to regain control, to come back to the present moment. So, breathing, what it does for us is it resets the central nervous system. If you're having a conversation and you're emotionally charged, then you need to reset some stuff. We need to reset some stuff. And stuff equals your central nervous system. So, when you are taking intentional breaths, what you are doing is you are manipulating or changing your respiratory rate. And when you change your when you change your respiratory rate, then you have physiological benefits that come from that that allow you to regain control of your emotion. Now, the breathing technique that I like using, that I actually use all the time, that I just used yesterday, when I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed with all the projects that I have going on is the box breathing technique. So drop me a yes in the chat really quick if you've heard of the box breathing technique. And as I see the chat light up or not light up, I'll tell you what it is. The box breathing technique allows you to intentionally control your breath. And what you do is you breathe in through your nose for 4 beats. I like to do 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're going to hold that breath for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to exhale for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you hold for 4 beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. And so that's the box. Breathe in, hold, breathe out, and hold. And so you can do this as many times as you need to feel a sense of calm. But this is one of those things that likely if you're in the heat of a conversation, you might have to stack this technique with another technique. Like, could you imagine being in your boss's office or being, in a colleague's office and just breathing? Like literally doing rounds and rounds and rounds of box breathing and not saying anything. Like, I think that would be pretty funny. And the person that you're talking to might like tap in and say, "Hey, is everything okay?" So this is one of those strategies that likely needs to be stacked with another strategy. And the other strategy that I want to offer you as you again re-dial into your central nervous system, you reactivate it. The strategy that you can use to stack is using questions. So you're getting yourself under control. And at the same time, you're asking questions to the person sitting in front of you. So you take the onus and the heat off of you to respond in all of that emotion and you put it back on them. So, one of the questions that I want to give you, which I really do want you to put in your back pocket, and I want you to just use it as often as you can when the time is appropriate. And that question is the technique actually is called it's called the mirroring technique. So the mirroring technique is a really effective technique to use when you just don't know what to say. If someone has said something shocking to you about how you're putting in all this work, it's not being recognized. In fact, they're telling you that you haven't done enough for them and you don't know what to say. The mirroring technique allows you to use or repeat the last 2 to 3 words of what that person has said to you in the form of a question. So let's take my boss when he said, "You're being ungrateful." If I'm using the box breathing, which I should be using to regain control of just my emotions, the other thing that I could do is I could use the mirroring technique and say, "Being ungrateful?" So you repeat the last 2 to 3 words back to the person that they have said to you. And what you are in effect doing, you're asking them a question, yes. You're taking the responsibility off of you to answer. Number three, what you're doing is you're giving them another opportunity to really commit to what they're saying. Like, is that really what you want to say to me right now? And so that's what the mirroring technique allows you to do. So the mirroring technique is really useful when you are in moments that are shocking and you just don't know what to say. You repeat the last 2 to 3 words. Not doing enough? Being ungrateful? Right? And you can, so some people ask me, "Well, Candace, how many times can I do that?" And you can do that about 3 times before things start getting weird. After you've done it 3 times, you now need to move on to another technique if that technique is not moving the conversation forward. So, box breathing is the first thing that we want to do to regulate our emotions, or more broadly, the technique is breathe deeply. All right, strategy number 2. Again, let's go to the chat. It is blank your emotions. Blank your emotions. What could go in that blank? Blank your emotions. Oh, thank you, Maria. Love the idea of the mirroring technique. Awesome. Sarah says control your emotions. That's good. Yep, I like control. Is there anything else? Hide your emotions, regulate your emotions. Thinking of something happy in life. You could like think happy thoughts about your emotions. I love all of those. And what I am looking for this blank is label. Label your emotions. Now, this seems like a really simple strategy, and it is. And it's one that we could use a lot more. So when you are in the moment, in the heat of conversation, you're feeling emotionally charged. One of the things that you can do to distance yourself from the emotion, because remember, part of emotional regulation is you have to separate yourself from the intensity of the emotion. So this technique allows you to do that in a really quick but effective way, and that is to label what you are feeling. So for me, what I was feeling in the room was frustration. That's one of the things that I was feeling. You might be feeling frustrated, annoyed, you might be feeling overwhelmed. Whatever the emotion is that you're feeling, you want to name it, label it. So, do I label it like out loud, Candace, or do I label it in my head? Good question. It depends on what the situation calls for. So, if you are in a situation and you really do feel frustrated, you can say to yourself, I feel frustrated right now. What affect labeling, which is what this is called in psychology, affect labeling, the reason why we do it, number one, it distances you from the emotion. Number two, what it does is when you label how you feel, you allow the emotion to flow through you rather than get stuck in you. And so if you want the like feeling too emotional to subside, then we need to label what it is we feel so that it can flow through us and then we can move on to something more effective or impactful. So this is also used. Some of you might have heard about affect labeling, but it's really big in grief counseling. So if you're grieving or if you're going through grief, a counselor will tell you oftentimes to label your emotions, and that is so the grief can flow through you rather than get stuck inside of you. So if you label it in your head, you could say, I feel frustrated right now. Or you can label it in the conversation. And what that might sound like is this. If you're frustrated, it might sound like, I'm feeling frustrated by the direction of this conversation and I want to work through it. So that's what you could easily say to someone. It's being honest, it's being human. I'm feeling a little frustrated. I need to take a beat. I need to figure out how to move through this. You could say that if that's appropriate for your conversation. So it's labeling your emotions. If it's frustration, if it's resentment, if it's sadness, you want to label it so it can move through you. So that's strategy number two for how we start to regain control of our emotions. Strategy number three, let's go back to the chat, is blank your muscles. What do we think might go in there? Blank your muscles. Do we have anything in the chat? Blank one. Flex your muscles. I like that. Relax your muscles. I like those. Those are great. And instead of relaxing, more on the end of flexing, what you want to do is tighten your muscles. So, again, if we're regulating our emotions, one of the things that can work in our favor is you actually want to tighten your muscles. Okay, it might be counterintuitive, it might sound counterintuitive, but allowing yourself to tighten a muscle group. Okay, so many people will say, and research will say, you can tighten your jaw and then release it, your hands, or your shoulders. Those are the three that people cite and research the most. What I have found to be effective though is tightening if you're sitting down, tightening your calf muscles. So if your foot's on the floor, you raise your heel off the floor, you keep your toes on the floor and you tighten your calf muscles. If you're standing up, one of the muscle groups that I like to tighten is your triceps. So you squeeze your triceps and you loosen them. So the way this works, the progressive muscle tightening technique or relaxation, progressive muscle relaxation, is you want to tighten a muscle, you want to hold it for about 4 seconds, and then you want to release it. And if you try it right now, if you're sitting down or standing up, you will feel a sense of liberation. So I'm going to invite you just to pick a muscle group. You can pick your calves if you're sitting down, but raise your heels off of the floor and hold it for 4 seconds, or tighten your triceps and hold it for 4 seconds. And then release. So what this does is it signals to your central nervous system that it is okay to relax. It is safe to relax. And that is, again, how we can start to regain control over our emotions. What all of these techniques do that I haven't talked about plainly is that they bring you back to the present moment. When you are emotionally charged, you are likely in your head. You're not in your seat. You're not in the present moment. And so all of these techniques bring you back to the present moment, but they also reset, internal systems within our body. So again, you want to tighten a muscle group, you want to hold it for about 4 or 5 seconds, and then you want to release it. And hopefully, if you just did that in this moment, you can feel the sense of relaxation that comes after you release the tension in the muscle group that you were holding it in. So again, this is strategy. Oh, excuse me. You all, thank you for working through this with me. I think I have an allergy attack that has come on. Excuse me. So this is progressive muscle relaxation. The last technique that I want to share with you before we move into Q&A is get blank. So this one, I know it's like this could be anything, but I am going to invite you to come back to the chat just one more time. Get what? What can we get? What would be a technique? All right, let's look in the chat. Get started. Thank you. Thank you, Christina. Get inspired. Get lost. Yeah, I like those. Get inspired. Get lost. I like that too. Like, I don't, the way that I'm interpreting that is like, it's not so deep. I don't know. That's just what floated through my head. But what we want to do is we want to get grounded. Okay. So again, we want to invite ourselves back to the present moment to allow ourselves to regain control over our emotions. And getting grounded can look a lot of different ways. But the way that I am going to share with you is getting grounded is literally it is seeing what is in front of you. It is using your five senses. What do you see? Well, right now I see a ring light in front of me. I see my phone next to me. What do you smell? Maybe you smell, lingering curry from your lunch. What can you touch? I can touch my desk, I can touch my jeans, and what can you hear? What can you taste? Taste is maybe a little bit harder to recognize, but what can you hear? The reason we get grounded by using our five senses is, of course, we're inviting ourselves back to the present moment. So if you're having a tense conversation, you can even use this with your partner, okay? But if you're having a tense conversation and you just are ready to tap out, you're ready to, fight or flight, we're ready to leave. If you want to commit to the conversation and commit to being there and commit to honoring yourself by saying something, one of the techniques is you can start looking around using your five senses and actually in your head saying what it is you see, smell, hear, taste, or can touch. Now, these are five techniques. Now, the first time you use it, you might have great success with any of these. But usually, what I find is that it is a process. When I do box breathing, I might have to go for 8 rounds before I actually feel calm. If you're using the progressive muscle relaxation, you might have to tighten your muscles for 5 or 6 times before your body starts to really feel like it's safe for you to speak up. But then there are times when you try these techniques and they just don't work. Oh, do we have one more strategy? Nope, I'm going the wrong way. They just don't work. And so I want to offer you some back pocket phrases that you can just again pull these out when you don't know what to say. You want to honor yourself in some way. There is some way in which you want to respond, but you just don't have it in you to do it right now. These phrases may come in handy. So you can say things like, I need to think through that before responding. That's a perfectly human response. It's a perfectly human way to engage in that conversation, to assert yourself, and to make space and make room for you to come back and more fully respond when you're ready. This one I like a lot, this next one, and I use it. That caught me off guard. Let me pause and come back to it. I use the phrase that caught me off guard quite a bit. Like if something just truly shocks me and I am feeling emotionally charged, I pull out that caught me off guard quite a bit, and I'm going to invite you to do the same thing. And then there are some other phrases here that you can take a picture of if you want to remember what these phrases are. So I don't have a summary slide, but don't worry because I'm going to offer you a download of all of these strategies that we just talked about and a couple of more in the Courage Now guide. This is a guide that has these techniques as well as a few more that we didn't get to discuss today. And it shares with you what the technique is, how you can use it, how it can be beneficial for you when you really are invited to act courageously or speak up courageously in the moment, but your emotions are challenging you to really do that. So I'm going to leave this up here for just a second. And I believe Megan has included a link as well in the chat so that if you want to access the guide or get the guide by using a link on your computer, you can do that as well. All right, so let me leave that up for just a second. And then I am going to invite, I think, Sarah back to the stage. And we're just wanting to see if there are any questions out there about how you can better regulate your emotions, or if you've got specific examples of hard conversations that you have wanted to tap into or chime into, but you just, you felt like you were just too emotional. The charge was too intense. Do you feel like any of these strategies may have helped you, or do you have any other questions? So, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Or Melanie or Megan.
It looks like Sarah is trying to come on. So I don't want to steal Sarah's thunder. Thank you so much, Candace, for amazing tips. I mean, I can see different ways. I love the box breathing. I also love the mirroring technique. I think those are two that I can definitely use in my day-to-day life, probably in conversations with my son.
Awesome. Yes, it's amazing how, of course, we're talking about professional spaces, but these are transferable to any parts of your life. Anytime you are, having a hard conversation, engaging in an invitation to speak up courageously, and there is emotion there, but you have something to say. These techniques can come in hand, personal, professional. But the mirroring technique is one that you don't have to give a lot of thought to, that just can be very effective.
Fantastic. Does anybody else have questions for Candace? I want to make sure that. Oh,
And then Natalia, if I'm saying that correctly, please note that we can't copy from the webinar chat. Maybe Q&A will allow, copy the link. This is constructive comment. It happens in the chat. Oh, okay. So the links we put in the chat, it sounds like you can't copy them. Okay. I'm not sure where, maybe the Q&A, if we can put them there.
we'll make sure to send out a follow-up email
Okay.
that has all of the information. And,
Okay.
and I
Perfect.
see that Sarah has made it back on her phone.
I apologize. As soon as you were calling on me, Candace, my Zoom decided to call it quits. I did get a question that came into me, so I'd love for you to address it, especially as it relates to our audience here, because our audience oftentimes they're realtors, they're independent contractors, or their own they run their own firms, right? They're
Right.
brokers. And so I want to flip the switch a little bit and ask, how can they be using these strategies when they have a, a client that doesn't want to pay their fee, or they have an agent who maybe raising some, issues with them. So how would you flip that narrative a little bit for our audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if we're feeling emotionally charged when those kind of conversations crop up, then these are techniques that can help us to regain control. And then, Sarah, if you're asking, like, how strategically can I respond if these types of conversations come up? So, those are another set of like assertive communication strategies. I'm going to offer up one right now. Um, so, let's say you have a client that doesn't want to pay your fee. Let's take that example.
Mhm.
and you're not exactly sure how to respond. Number one, you've used these techniques to regain control of your emotions, so you're not going to, respond too emotionally charged. But a technique, an assertive communication technique that's really effective that I might try in this situation is called the fogging technique. And what that looks like is it works perfectly, or it works well when you're in disagreement with another person. There's a person that has their own perspective. I don't believe that, the value that you're bringing me is worthy of this fee. That's their perspective. And your perspective is, I have done X, Y, and Z and more than this fee. The fogging technique, the way you would use it is you would find something that you can agree with that the other person has said. So if they have said, in this case, of course, I'm thinking off the top of my head, but Sarah, if you have, an example that can help, then please share. But if this person has said, I really believe that my real estate agent should be doing everything that they can do to help find me my next home. And I just don't agree. I don't think that you've done this and you're not worthy of this fee. Okay, I'm making this up.
Mhm.
What you could agree with that they have said is you might agree with that a real estate agent should be doing everything that they can do to help me find my home. So the fogging technique, you start with agreement. You find one piece of the person's argument that you can agree with, and you say, "You're right. You're right. You're right that a real estate agent's job is to work hard for you to find you their next home." So when you agree with a person first, what you are doing is you are in effect, you're lowering defenses. Everybody wants to believe that they are smart, that they are good, and they are capable. And when you agree with someone, you are essentially validating that they're right, that they're smart, and that lowers defenses. Then you make a connect or a transition at the same time. uh Also something to consider, whatever your transition is, and then you insert your perspective. And so that's the point in which you want to, share the value that you bring. But you don't want to do tit for tat. Whenever someone, these kind of conversations happen, you never want to do tit for tat, because you're just going to get a lot of tension and a lot of defensive and a lot of guards. So that I'm going to offer up that technique, which is start with agreement. And so, however you can personalize that for yourself, everyone on this call, I would invite you to do that. How can you start with agreement, make a transition, and then insert your perspective?
Wow. Well, I absolutely appreciate the tangible strategies you've given us today, and I hope that you all have wrote down notes, because I know I did. But we will also be sending this in a follow-up email to all of you. We'll be posting, with Candace's permission, a blog article following up this amazing 45 minutes of pure strategy to help us in our communications and in our courageous leadership. So I appreciate you. And I'm going to ask Melanie for a little bit of help. If I missed a question, I don't, in my Zoom purgatory that I got, I would appreciate you asking it so we don't miss it. Um, but I don't think I did. I'm
I
not sure.
see that Yolanda just dropped a question in.
Would you?
Um,
I don't.
yep. What happens when you're serving on a committee where the chair feels like nothing is ever right, but you don't want to quit because you don't want to let the other members down?
Hmm.
A good,
The
good one,
chair feels
Yolanda.
like nothing is ever right, but you don't want to quit. Okay. So the first, I'm going to address the first part of this question. Um, the quitting part is, that's another part which we could probably take 20 minutes to answer. So let me address the first part. When a person feels like something is never going right, like there's just never the right solution, then a really effective technique that we talked about in this conversation is actually to ask questions. You want to get that person who never thinks that something is right to pinpoint what it is, they are challenged with. So questions could sound like, what are the flaws that you see in this strategy? What are the what are the what do you think is missing from this perspective? You actually want to ask questions to get the person to pinpoint what it is, they find is wrong. Because oftentimes what happens is a person who just constantly and repetitively complains about something, if you were to ask them to go deep on something, oftentimes they can't. Oftentimes they can't pinpoint it. So questions allows them to actually commit to, the challenges that they're raising. So that's one thing that I'll offer is how can you, rather than just accept that this person, isn't agreeing with how can you ask them questions to get them to pinpoint?
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the question. I know a lot of people wonder that as well. Well, with that, I'm going to say I think we want to let Candace go on with her day and join us in Chula Vista live and in the flesh. And so, thank you so much, Candace, for your time and for your amazing wisdom. We appreciate you and thank you all for your attention. We'll see you in Chula Vista on September 15th through the 17th. And we will see you on our next Woman Up call, which is Melanie.
Uh,
Next month.
September, sorry, I mentioned it earlier.
Oh, I thought you knew it like
September
this.
24th at 11.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye.